Hello and welcome. Today we're going to explore an ancient story that I think really gets to the heart of a struggle we all know so well, that constant battle inside our own minds to find a little bit of peace. So let's just dive right in with this. Have you ever promised yourself, okay, this time it's different, only to find yourself right back where you started a week later? It's such a universal feeling, right? And it is the absolute core of the story we're getting into today. So, let me introduce you to a man named Chirahata. Now, he lived thousands of years ago, but honestly, his problem is about as modern as it gets. He was a man whose mind just would not stay still. This verse from the ancient texts just nails Chirahata's state of being. It's describing someone whose internal compass is always spinning, whose faith in their own path is shaky. And when you don't have that stability, real wisdom just can't take root. It has nowhere to grow. The original term for this is anavatititasa. Think of it like this. It's like a gourd just bobbing around on the surface of the water, or maybe a post that's been stuck loosely in the sand. There's just no solid ground, no stability. It's a mind that can be anything for a moment, but nothing for long. So how did this unsettled mind actually play out for Chirahata? Well, it trapped him. It trapped him in this incredibly frustrating, repeating cycle of decisions. And here's the magic number, 6. That is how many times Chirahata became a monk and then gave it all up. 6 separate times he walked the path of spiritual discipline, and 6 times he turned right back around to his old life. And you can see his whole loop laid out right here. It always began the same way. He'd think the monastery was an easy life. Good food, no tough manual labor. But pretty soon he'd get restless. He'd miss his home, his family, so he'd go back, only to find that, worldly life has its own huge struggles. And so, back to the monastery he'd go, again and again. It got so bad the other monks actually gave him a nickname, Chirahata, which basically means the one who's led around by his mind. But then, on his 7th attempt to leave his home, something was different. One single, totally ordinary moment was about to change everything for him, forever. So picture this. He's finished his work in the fields for the day, he's tired, and his mind is right back in that same old rut. He walks into his house, and his plan is simple. Grab his monk's robes and leave his family for the 7th time. But as he walked into the room, he saw his wife sleeping. And it wasn't some romantic, peaceful image. It was real. She was snoring, drooling a little, her clothes were all messy. It was just a raw, unfiltered, completely unglamorous moment of real human life. And in that single instant, seeing his wife not as this idealized thing he desired, but just as a person, something clicked. He finally saw the raw reality of the life he kept chasing, its impermanence, its built-in struggle. He grabbed his robes and just walked out the door. And on that path, walking back to the monastery, that one moment of deep insight allowed him to finally break the cycle. He had taken the first irreversible step toward true peace. The war inside his head was finally coming to an end. Now, when he showed up at the monastery, you can imagine the other monks were a little skeptical. "Oh, you again," they probably thought. They were hesitant to ordain him for a 7th time. But they did. And this time, it was completely different. Because his mind was finally settled, because he'd seen the truth with his own eyes, his progress was just incredibly fast. Within just a few days, he achieved what he had struggled with for years, a state of irreversible peace, full enlightenment. Later on, when the monks were kind of scratching their heads about his sudden transformation, the Buddha explained the difference. He told them that before, Chirahata's mind was unsettled, pulled every which way by desire. But now, it was free. It wasn't soaked in lust or clouded by anger. He was awake, and as the Buddha said, for the awakened, there is no fear. And to really drive home just how powerful even the smallest attachments can be, the Buddha told a story from one of his own past lives. It's a parable that perfectly mirrors Chirahata's journey. So, in this past life, he was an ascetic, a wise man named Kudala Pandita. And just like Chirahata, he found himself stuck in that same cycle, leaving worldly life for a spiritual one, only to get pulled back again and again. You guessed it, 6 times in total. But here's the kicker. What was pulling him back? It wasn't some grand desire for wealth or power or even family. His attachment was to something so simple, a little bit of grain and a single, worn-out, blunt spade he used for gardening. And this just shows you, the size of the chain doesn't matter. A chain is still a chain. So on his 7th attempt, Kudala Pandita knew he had to do something drastic. He went down to the riverbank, closed his eyes tight so he wouldn't see where it landed, swung that old spade around his head 3 times, and just launched it into the water. He didn't look back, he just severed the attachment completely. And as that spade splashed into the water, he didn't feel loss. He felt freedom. He actually shouted out loud, "I have won! I have won!" And this wasn't a victory over some enemy. It was a victory over himself. Well, as it happened, a king returning from a huge military campaign was nearby. He heard the sage's cry and was, a bit confused. He said, "Wait a minute. I'm the one who just won a battle. What victory are you celebrating?" The sage's explanation to the king really gets to the very core of this entire story. He said, "Your Majesty, your victory can be reversed. The enemies you beat today might beat you tomorrow. But the victory I just won, the one over my own inner greed, that can never ever be taken away from me. That is the only true victory." And that, of course, brings the lesson right back to us, doesn't it? We all have things we cling to, big and small, that keep us stuck in those loops. So the question this story leaves us with is a really personal one. What is the blunt spade in your life? What is that one attachment that, if you could truly let it go, would lead to your own true victory? It's definitely something worth thinking about. Thank you for joining me for this explainer. May you all be happy.